Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Beer and Money. My name is Ryan Burklo, and on today's episode, we're going to get real about retirement planning. What I mean by that is, stop and think about it. When your paychecks stop coming in the door, not the Instagram version, but the real life version, the one where, the market's going up and down, taxes and longevity are all starting to play a role, and your nest egg has got to last your life, and you're on the verge of retirement. You want to be able to say confidently, yeah, I'm good. So today we're going to talk about the real risk of retirement income and how to start planning for it now. I know that many of our listeners are not, a couple years away from retirement. You might be 10, 15 years away from retirement. But just because you're that far away doesn't mean you don't need to start planning for that today. Because I can tell you from experience, too often I have clients that come in and they're in retirement or on the verge of retirement. And after our conversations, they all say, I wish I would have known about this earlier. So that's what we're going to dive in today. I hope this is going to be good. Make sure you log into our YouTube channel because a lot of it's going to be visual. I'll do my best for the audio side of stuff to explain what's going on. But make sure you check out the YouTube channel because I think the visual side is going to be key for this. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So I'm going to share my screen. So what I want to start considering, or you to consider, is this. What do you know about retirement planning? So imagine you've got a sum of money, all right? $2 million, $5 million, $6 million, whatever that sum of money is. And now your job is to turn on an income stream. And that income stream, you're wondering, okay, can I withstand it, right? The market may go up or down. Taxes, I don't know what that's going to look like. Longevity adds in, health concerns, obviously, but the money's got to last an unknown period of time. Have you set up your balance sheet to address all of these situations? And so the first thing I want to dive into is this variable market aspect when you get to retirement. What do most people look like when they get to retirement? When they get to retirement, in my experience, they've got a sum of money. It tends to be in retirement plans, maybe some in investment accounts. And they're not taking as much risk, right? So maybe their portfolio over the long haul has been a higher risk. Maybe they're taking 90% stocks, 80% stocks, and the rest maybe in bonds and cash. But as you're getting close to retirement, like the stereotypical retirement plan that I see out there, they're slowly dwindling down to maybe a 60-40 type allocation, 60% stocks, 40% bonds. Well, it still has risks. The market's still going to go up and down. And so the first couple years of retirement, you've got a real risk. And that risk is what happens if the year you retire, the market's down? Or the second year you're in retirement, the market's down. How does that affect your overall balance sheet, meaning your money? So what you're staring at here is an exercise that we go through with a lot of our clients. And we're talking about most of our money is in these variable funds. And variable funds as in that retirement plan I just spoke about. Maybe it's 60% stocks, 40% bonds in this instance. And let's just say you've got $2 million in overall funds, right? This isn't including Social Security. This is just talking about assets outside of the house. So what's in variable funds, that means that money can go up and down. So in year one, with the $2 million, let's just pretend that there's a 9% market loss that year. And even in a 60-40 allocation, I can promise you 9% market loss can occur. So with this sum of money, they're $2 million. 9% market loss means they just lost $180,000 of the $2 million. And they're also having to take an income stream, right? The paychecks have stopped coming in the door. The paycheck is now coming from their nest egg. So in this example, they're taking $80,000. They're doing that 4% rule of thumb that we've all heard about. Taking 4% of your income stream is a relatively low risk. We're going to talk about risk here in a minute. But in this example, it's 4%, so that's $80,000. So if we do $180,000 market loss from the $2 million, and they took $80,000, that means at the end of year one, their end of year account value is now down to $1.74 million. Year two comes around. Now they've got the $1.74 million. Let's just say there's an 11% market loss. And by the way, this does happen, right? All you just do is go back and look at 2000, 2001, 2002, multiple years of negative loss. In this example, we're showing an 11% market loss. So now $1.74 million, 11% loss equates to $191,400 lost. And by the way, they still need income, so they're still taking that $80,000. So the actual market loss over the last 2 years is 20%. Their nest egg is down to $1.468 million, $1,468,600. So their actual portfolio reduction is down 27%. The market's been down 20, they're down 27% because again, they still have to take $80,000 out. This is how many retirees are, and this is why they take only a 4% withdrawal rate. They're not taking higher because they haven't set up their balance sheet to be able to take a higher income stream. And are you at all nervous? Imagine yourself, for example, you came to retirement at $2 million. At the end of your second year, your $2 million, $500,000 is gone. You're down to 1.5. Are you at all freaking out possibly? Many people are. This is the whole thought of, will I outlive my money? So how do we combat that, right? And so we're going to get into how do we combat that? And that's having more liquid funds, not having all of our money in variable funds, meaning markets going up and down. Now, I'm not suggesting that this person take their $2 million and go to cash or play that game. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I am suggesting is understanding if we have another bucket of money, if this $2 million, maybe there's $1.5 million in the variable funds and we've got $500,000 in a liquid fund. So it's $500,000 in a different bucket of money, same $2 million, but the $500,000 is in a bucket of money where it can't go down. For simplistic example, let's just say these are CDs, right? And they're maturing CDs and they're rolling maturities so you can have access to certain funds at certain times. How does that play out? Right? Well, how that plays out is if the market's up in any given year, we can take the money from our variable bucket, right? Market's up 11%. Okay, let's take the 4% from that bucket. If the market's down, well, then maybe we don't want to take the money from the variable bucket. Maybe we want to take it from the bucket of money that isn't variable, meaning it's not down 9%. Maybe it's up like 2-3%. So we'll take it from the liquid bucket instead. Financial planning isn't all about rate of return and making sure we're getting the best investment rate. It's also about building our balance sheet to withstand life. And that's a key component to financial planning. So that's part one of today's conversation. What I want to do is transition into what are the real risks, right? If the real risk is, or the real concern is outliving our money, what does that really look like? Okay, so let's actually analyze that. So we're going to go over here, okay? And we're going to analyze the real risk. So again, if we're going to imagine that you're 65 years of age, 70 years of age, whatever the age is, you need that money to last your entire life, and not only your entire life, probably your spouse's entire life. Otherwise, she may not like you very much. So you have 30-year time horizon, what I'm going to put in. If you're 70 years old, it takes you out to age 100, okay? And I'm going to use different numbers here just for sake of argument here. Let's just say we're going to use, and let's just say a $3 million portfolio. With the $3 million, let's get into real life scenario. Let's get into the weeds here. So what I'm analyzing here is this is a Monte Carlo simulation, okay? And if you haven't heard of a Monte Carlo simulation, what it does is it spits out a failure rate or a success rate, depending on how you look at it, on what's the chances that you outlive your money, right? The market can go all over the place in any given year. So this is going to do 1,000 different iterations of what the market can do, and it's going to spit out a failure rate based on the inputs that we give it. So a lot of times when I'm sitting down with someone and they look like this, they've got $3 million, I'll ask them, okay, do we want to be aggressive with the money or do we not want to be aggressive with the money? Let's just say we're working with someone that is going to be relatively aggressive and they say, I'm going to be relatively aggressive. Let's just go growth and let's just say it's a 10% rate of return. Okay, so average 10% rate of return is what this person's going to get. Keep in mind that's going to be the average, so it's going to be up and down throughout time. We'll analyze that here in a second. The other thing that I'll ask is, do you want to keep pace with inflation? And of course, they say yes to this. So we're going to use a 3% inflation rate. We're not here to analyze whether or not that 3 is low or high. For the sake of argument, we're going to use 3%. Then the next question I ask them is, well, are you going to pay taxes? And of course, the answer to that question most of the time is yes. Okay. So if they're going to pay taxes, they're doing $3 million. They're getting a 10% rate of return. And if they're doing 3% inflation, maybe they'll take 7% from this portfolio, right? Because they're getting a 10% rate of return and inflation's 3, that's 7% if we subtract the two. So in their mind, they're thinking, well, I can take out 10% and hopefully my account doesn't deplete because I'm just taking that essentially what the growth is in the account. So 7% of $3 million is $210,000. Now, they're going to owe taxes on the $210,000, as well as if this money, the $3 million, is in investment accounts, they might be paying taxes on that money as well. So let's just say they're in I'm going to use a efficient tax rate. Let's just say it's an effective tax rate of 10%. And last but not least, this money that's invested, do you think there's fees on that investment? Like, do you think they're getting a 10% net of fee rate of return? The answer to that question is no. So let's just say they're in a low-cost fee structure. They're at 0.5%. So let's look at this, review this. They've got a $3 million asset. They've decided to leave it in that variable account, that retirement plan, whatever that looks like. That 60-40 allocation is actually probably higher than that. 60-40, this is probably like a 70-30 allocation. 70% stocks, 30% bonds. They're taking out $210,000, and they'll have to pay taxes at a 10% efficient, at a 10% rate. They'll pay fees, and every year, they're going to bump the $210,000 cash flow that they want for lifestyle. They're going to bump it by 3% to keep pace with inflation. So I'm going to come down here, I'm going to hit calculate, and it's going to spit out a failure rate. Now, before I show you what the failure rate is, let me ask you a question. What failure rate do you deem okay? Like if this spit out a 50% failure rate, are you okay? That means 50% of the time you're going to outlive your money. And just so we're clear, I've never had anyone say yes to that. I'm okay with that. Right? I tend to get answers as I'm asking this question. I tend to get answers anywhere between, on the high end, I might get 10, but I typically get somewhere between like 1 and maybe 5. So let's go down and look at the failure rate. And again, what this is 1,000 different iterations of what the market could do. The blue line that you see here is the mythical average that this person could get. And you can see they still outlive their money. And you can see all the other different iterations as well. There is someone that actually makes it. They've got $4.8 million at the end. There's another variation where they actually outlive their money past year 11. Like past year 11, they're out of money. It's a 75% failure rate. And just to show you how this works, it does 1,000 different iterations every time I hit calculate here. 75.42. All right, I'll hit it one more time just to show it. And you can see it changes to 75.82. So in the end, this is not a good thing. 75% of the time. So let's go back up here. You might be thinking, well, they're just taking too much money. Or maybe you say they're taking too much risk. So let's go down to a conservative where it's 8% rate of return. Let's go down here and hit calculate. Let's see if that changes it. They're taking less risk. Oh, that didn't help them. It actually went higher. Now it's a 96% failure rate. Now keep in mind, while the volatility was not as high, the opportunity for higher rate of return also went lower because they took less risk. So let's bump this back to the 10%. Oops. Bump this back to the 10%. Now we're analyzing, okay, 210 isn't going to work. Let's drop it down to 180, right? $30,000 pay cut. Let's say calculate. So it helped. It's 57% failure rate, but it's still not that great. Really what's going to come down to is most people, they're not going to take this aggressive of an approach. They're going to take the conservative approach at 8%. And again, we go back to that 4% rule. So now it's 120. And as we go down here and hit calculate, you can see that now we're looking at a 12% failure rate. Now, many people would still say that's quite high. And what's really interesting is this is the 4% rule of thumb. What oftentimes isn't calculated in a lot of Monte Carlo simulations, they don't calculate taxes and they don't calculate any kind of fees in the portfolio. So if we take those out, this is probably going to look better. Yeah, there it is. 3% failure rate. Most people are going to be okay with this. But we do have to take consideration into taxes. We do have to take consideration into fees. Okay? So again, I've already spoken into, like, this is a higher risk type of strategy for retirement. What could we do different? So I talked about having a liquid bucket. I've talked about a bunch of different things. The other thing I haven't even brought up, let's just say this person actually cares about legacy. If they want $1 million legacy, that's $1 million that they don't want to risk. They want to make sure $1 million gets passed on to their kids. Well, now we're looking at a 20% failure rate. Right? That changes things. So now let's look at a different strategy. Right? I've already said that this isn't the best strategy. Let's look at the alternative. What if we did this? Instead of doing all $3 million in that retirement plan and taking that risk, let's just say we put $1 million in that same retirement plan, leave it there. I'm going to put the $1 million legacy in there. We still want the 120. We're still going to do that conservative, same portfolio, 8% rate of return. Let me just make sure. Yeah, 8%. Same inflation at 3, tax rate at 10, fee rate at 0.5%. Here's where things changes. What we're going to do is we're going to do $100,000 in a liquid bucket. That could be, maybe this is CDs, checking accounts. Maybe we're getting a higher rate of return. Maybe it's some forms of permanent life insurance where you're going to get some cash value growth, right? So let's just say we're getting a 3-4% rate of return there. If we did the permanent life insurance, we're going to have $1 million death benefit. It might even be more than that. And the other thing we're going to do is we're going to turn on a guaranteed income stream, right? So this is what's called an annuity. And I know it takes a bad rap. It's called a single premium immediate annuity, where we're going to take $1 million. We're going to give it to the insurance company, right? We're at age 70, like we said. And at age 70, $1 million is going to turn on an $80,000 income stream guaranteed for the rest of this person's life. Because we turned on $80,000, so 80 of the 120 is guaranteed. So right away, they'll never outlive their money because they're always going to have $80,000 coming in the door. Okay? But also, did that take less pressure off of this variable account, off the money that is still invested in the market? Maybe, maybe not. We're going to analyze this. So again, just quick comparison. Most people, they're leaving their money in the retirement plan. $3 million is in that bond stock account. It's going to fluctuate up and down, right? The other strategy that we're talking about is splitting the $3 million up into 3 different buckets. One is the variable account bucket. One is the true liquidity bucket. And one is the guaranteed income bucket. We always have $80,000 coming in the door. And we're leaving $1 million legacy still. So we're doing apples to apples comparison, same 120 cash flow. So let's analyze this. So I'm going to do current and alternate. So again, the current strategy, again, 20% failure rate. The alternate strategy that I just shared with you, less than 1% failure rate, 0.82. And I'll hit calculate here again just to see. 0.86, I'll hit it one more time. It's less than 1% failure rate. And now you can see this from a standpoint of making sure that we get into retirement and we're not worried about our assets going up and down. And are we worried about outliving our money anymore? Chances are not. And with this low of a failure rate, if we're okay with 20% failure rate, well, if I turned on a higher income stream then, so let's just now compare, and I'm making up numbers here. Let's just say I'm going to change it to $130,000. Okay. Scenario 1, $120,000. I'm changing scenario 2, the alternate strategy, Well, I've got the 3 buckets, the variable bucket, the liquidity bucket, and the guaranteed income, and I'm taking 130. I don't know, I'm doing this live. Let's see what the calculator spits out as the analysis. Well, 18%. So if you're okay with a 20% failure rate on scenario 1 at 120, well, I think you'd rather have 130 of income coming to you and have even a lower failure rate. So I wanted to go over this with you because this is a key component about financial planning that is often overlooked. So much of financial planning is focused on investing and rates of return. And I'm not going to lie, that's a part of it. But what is not considered is when we turn on an income stream, that changes stuff. You don't want to outlive your money. You don't know what your health's going to do. You want to spend more money, obviously spending time with your family, but the last thing you want to do is worried about the market going up and down. So what's the real risk? This is how you analyze that. I realize most of you are not close to retirement. I'm not suggesting that you go purchase an annuity right now. I'm not suggesting anything like that. What I am suggesting is where you're saving money today matters. And if you're wanting to set yourself up for higher income, lower risk, more liquidity, better flexibility, then making sure we have different buckets of money with different risk tolerances is key. Because you can't choose like $3 million. When you're about to retire, you can't then say, well, Ryan, let's do the 3 bucket approach. Because what if the year before you retire, maybe that's the year that the market's down. Like you're leaving that risk up. So you have to make those decisions today. So let's have that conversation. And I hope like the whole purpose of today is educating you on retirement income planning, not for the purpose of you deciding how much income you need in retirement or even that piece. The purpose of today is how to plan for the future today and making sure you're looking at the entire picture, not just focusing on, I'm only going to focus on rate of return, making sure that you set yourself up with different buckets to have this type of flexibility. That's what I had for today. I hope this episode was valuable. Make sure you check us out on beerandmoney.net. There'll be in the show notes, you have the link for that where you can see the video side of today's episode, as well as you have 2 other links in there. One is we've got a new Instagram account, so make sure you check us out on the Instagram account. I will put that link in there. And then lastly, if you want your own financial scorecard, like if you're wondering, I wonder how I'm doing, like what am I on pace to look like? What does that scorecard look like? We're going to put that in the show notes as well. You can go in, put in some information. It gives you a scorecard at the end. I don't get any of that information, so you should be aware of that. That literally stays with you. It's just its own site, and you can look at it for yourself. And hopefully that gives you some value around what you're looking like. Hope this episode was valuable for you. And as always, cheers.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not to be construed as tax, legal, or investment advice. Although the information has been gathered from sources believed to be reliable, please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon only when coordinated with individual professional advice. Guest speakers and their firms are not affiliated with or endorsed by Park Avenue Securities, Guardian, or Quantified Financial Partners, and opinions stated are their own. Guardian, its subsidiaries, agents, and employees do not provide tax, legal, or accounting advice. Consult your tax, legal, or accounting professional regarding your individual situation. All investments and investment strategies contain risk and may lose value. This material is intended for general public use. By providing this content, Park Avenue Securities, LLC is not undertaking to provide investment advice or a recommendation for any specific individual or situation, or to otherwise act in a fiduciary capacity. Please contact a financial representative for guidance and information that is specific to your individual situation. Ryan and Alex are registered representatives and financial advisors of Park Avenue Securities, LLC. OSJ 200 Market Street, Suite 1850, Portland, Oregon 97201. Phone number 503-221-1226. Securities products and advisory services offered through Park Avenue Securities, member FINRA, SIPC. Financial representatives of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, Guardian, New York, New York. Park Avenue Securities is a wholly owned subsidiary of Guardian. Quantified Financial Partners is not an affiliate or subsidiary of Park Avenue Securities or Guardian. Ryan Burklo, CA Insurance License Number 0K24924. Alexander Collins, CA Insurance License Number 0H24806.
849065.1, expiration date October 2027.